Turkey's jihadist president Erdogan has opened his halal pie hole once again and informed us that he is considering or would consider, if needed, or something, invade Israel. So, I don't know with this guy how often he means it, how often he's just talking because there have been a series of headlines that didn't mention him in Western media, and he feels left out and forgotten. But he's talking, and within the context of the last 10 months, we've seen that often when jihadists in the Middle East talk and they see and actually do things and see that Israel doesn't respond, words do sometimes become deeds. So he said, this is the quote, some of the quote, we must be very strong so that Israel can't do these things to Palestine. By these things, he means prevent Palestinians from exterminating the Jews. Just as we entered Karabakh, just as we entered Libya, we must do the same to them. There is nothing we can't do. We must only be strong. Um, Now, yeah, so he's referring to past instances where Turkey had some military involvement. In Azerbaijan. It was, I think, not involving troops on the ground, right? In Libya, it did. But the very fact that he can speak like this, says something about maybe the current way that Israel is handling its diplomacy is not good. Maybe the way it's handling its war is not good, and maybe, and I know this is out there, but maybe the two are actually connected somehow. Welcome to the Daily Objective. And Davy Boy says in the chat, NATO powers would not permit Turkey to attack Israel. I think, yeah, I don't think that's a thing. I mean, they can't tell them not to do it. They can tell him you shouldn't, but they can't prevent him in any way. The good thing in this scenario, if Israel actually had the balls to do what's needed, is if he took any action, I don't think the NATO would have other NATO countries would have to be involved if Israel retaliates because it would be a war started by Turkey. Um, Now, Geert Wilders, the leader of the Freedom Party, is it in the Netherlands? The biggest party, the biggest member of the coalition in the new government, has said, and he's good on some things, terrible on others, but he has said that NATO should kick Turkey out. And we've said this on this channel. It's really, really bizarre. It maybe not historically bizarre that Turkey was a part of NATO, but under Erdogan didn't just come to power and we're trying to see if his rhetoric matches his actions. He's been in power for a very long time. We know he is a force for evil in the world, and we should act accordingly if NATO is supposed to be a force for good. Now, the problem is those who are on the side of the good seem to be apologetic about it and unsure that that's where they should stand. So yeah, kicking the only Muslim country out of NATO, I think is not going to happen. Daniel.
Yeah, so Turkey is no Iran, it's no Russia, it's not China. Turkey is supposedly, country in NATO, so supposedly Western aligned. It's a country that has growing relationships with the EU. There have been, I mean, now those sort of talks are freezed, but for a long time there was an idea that Turkey would even join the EU, or at least some outside ring of the EU. Uh, and this is this is what we get from that. This is what happens. I mean, this whole idea that Turkey is still in has any sort of like friendly relationships with the West. It's just crazy. And again, we've been talking about this for a long time, and I think we've talked about this specifically before because, as you mentioned, Erdogan runs his mouth, or at least likes to a lot. So I remember we had an episode about this in the past, so we've talked about something similar. But here are the facts: like, Turkey is actively like allowing Hamas, basically, uh, political leadership to stay in their country. Uh, Turkey, in many cases, although of course not officially, but has been training many Hamas operatives. So we know these things are happening. Turkey is an actual enemy of Israel. If you give refuge to political leadership of someone you're fighting against, you are in a sense declaring war on that country. And th- yeah, I mean, so we've heard from the Dutch politician. So he's from the party called Party for Freedom, and yeah, I've looked him up a bit before the show, and I think I even looked him up when he won the election. Um, and yeah, he is very very mixed, but at least on Israel, I think he advocated for moving the embassy to Jerusalem. So he has and he seems to be very pro-Israel. I think one line people often quote him for is the fact that Jordan is the Palestinian state. So he considers like the whole idea that there should be a Palestinian state in the West Bank or Gaza as sort of illegitimate. So these are nice. And one thing he mentioned is the fact that Turkey should be kicked out of NATO. And yeah, there is no reason for Turkey to be in NATO. I still see one thing before I go back to you. One point I always like to make is, I really dislike the United Nations because they equalized, basically, they make all the nations to appear as basically equal, which is not true. The Western countries are better. That's an objective fact. And you have most of the nations in the world are authoritarian. These nations should not be in the same group. That's why I personally kind of like things like NATO or the EU. Both of these countries supposedly have some standard for basically letting nations in. For EU, there is a certain economic development, it's a certain requirement for democracy and freedom, but they don't keep it. And similarly, NATO doesn't either. NATO should have some requirement. I think political requirement, basically, you should be Western aligned nations and you should have, in a sense, Western principles. I don't think Turkey, at least now, holds any of them. In that fact, Israel is much closer, much more NATO aligned than Turkey is right now. Um,
Yeah. As for the EU, I agree. I mean, the original idea was a free trade zone, which was fantastic. Then politicians got involved, and now it's a controlled market zone with many bad things. But yeah, I'm with you. NATO is also a great idea. Also, a point about well, it's a great idea. Could be done better. With Geert Wilders, yeah, historically, look, he's often reported as far right. I heard about his comments yesterday in Israeli media where he's referred to as far right. Of course, Israeli media is far left and anti-Israel. So anybody who's pro-Israel, and one thing he's very clear on, he's very pro-Israel. He's maybe the most pro-Israel, senior politician anywhere in Europe. Almost certainly, I can't think of anybody that high up in any country, maybe other than the Czech Republic, who is so openly pro-Israel. Um, but yeah, on economics and so on, he's of the left. But anyway, let's go back to Erdogan. Ginger says Erdogan is a real baddie. Turkey used to be westernized before him. Yeah, I mean, again, it did make sense to have Turkey around, in the past, and Turkey used to be the number one destination for Israelis outside of Israel. Now, for vacation. Now, Israelis don't have many options because they're surrounded by savages who want to slaughter every Jew they come across. So the closest you can fly basically is Cyprus and then Turkey. And he had these resorts that all-inclusive resorts that were very popular with Israelis. And those of you who attended the production meeting have already heard me made the joke that Turkey is basically surviving now on the interest from Jewish tourists, which I don't think is exactly the case, but it was funny at the time. Um, and yeah, what Turkey like we're forgetting that what Turkey has become. Countries change, and then you change your relationship with them, and they're voting for this guy. He's elected, so the West really needs to have more oversight and more scrutiny of their relationships. Again, we see this from and when I say the West, I mostly mean America, because the rest will either follow or can be cut off. The enemies are treated well, the allies are treated badly. We see this with how the US, is now trying to get Iran back into the nuclear deal. That's shocking. That's while Iran every single day is firing at Israel. We see Britain today deciding to announce that it's going to stop selling weapons to Israel, like Israel, like Israel is dependent on British weapons. I think maybe slightly more than Canadian weapons, but not much. But this statement, it's made today, 2 days after savages slaughtered 12 children. So yeah, on the one hand, this is how the West treats its own, and on the other hand, Erdogan is a NATO member.
So about the British arms, I think it is. I think I've read somewhere that it's like 0.2% of the basically all the imports Israel gets is coming from UK. But how many is not really important. The important part is the sort of like, what are you implying with this message? You are sending the message that no, we, in a sense, are not supporting Israel in defending themselves against a war of aggression. Coming from Hamas, who basically tried to annihilate as many Jews as they could. Okay, what else? Do you want to cover the super
Yeah.
chat? I can
Yeah,
always
I'll get to
mention
the
this stuff.
super chat. I want to get to the flotilla incident back when we get back to Erdogan, but thank you, Bulmus, for the super chat. Bulmus says, I could be mistaken, but wouldn't a NATO country engaging a war that isn't of self-defense be legal grounds for removal from NATO? So I don't know the answer. WUB in the chat says they attacked Cyprus in 75, and Greece is also at NATO. Michael says most NATO members would be kicked out if that was true. And
So
yeah,
yeah,
uh,
I researched this last time we talked about sort of Turkey and NATO, and from what I understand, there is actually no mechanism to remove a country from NATO so far. It has never happened, and there was no, in a sense, mechanism. There are, in a sense, lines such as I think in the articles something like you should always, in a sense, try to find a peaceful resolution to a conflict, and in a sense, you shouldn't engage in the war of aggressions. Uh,
yeah.
but again, yeah.
So I'll get to that in a second. Christian said when Turkey occupied Cyprus, Greece was a dictatorship. That's why it was tolerated at the beginning. Yeah, it's still tolerated. And by the way, the Palestinians are dictatorships, two different ones. Lebanon is a dictatorship. So yeah, this is one of the many things that are not applied when said dictatorship wants to murder all the Jews. By the way, I'm sure many of you have seen the headline after the murder of the children in the north of Israel that this was an attack on Israeli occupied Golan, which is a way of saying, well, this is Israel's fault because, the rightful, peaceful person who should be, whose jurisdiction this area should be in is Assad because it's occupied from Syria. So the media is actually on the side of any dictatorship. Syria gassed their own people. They used chemical weapons against their own people. But at least they're not the Jews. As far as the no mechanism for removing a member state,
Oh, let me just quickly
yeah,
jump in for one more thing. Something I found really, I think, disgusting is, yeah, so I was researching the attack on that Israeli village in the occupied Golan. And when I searched it up on Wikipedia, it always shows the map. And the way it showed it is if it was an attack on Syria. It basically had the Syrian map there with the basically it had sort of those like wiggly lines about the occupied Golan, but like Israel was grayed out as if this is not actually part of Israel. It is part of Israel. It's actually fully integrated territory. It was
yeah,
annexed
yeah.
after the Arabs tried for I think the second time to annihilate all the Jews in the area and failed.
Yeah, the Golan Heights were annexed. People there are citizens or eligible for citizenship. They can vote. This village, I've been to it a few times, as have all Israelis who enjoy skiing, because there's one ski resort in Israel and it's in the Golan Heights, and Majd al-Shams is literally like right when you go up that mountain, and so you tend to stop there. Um, yeah, and by the way, that rocket was fired from it's a rock it's a rocket or a missile that has a range of 10 kilometers. So it was nearby. So if Israel wanted to do something, but we're going to talk about that a bit more in the reality show. Uh, yeah, so on the no mechanism for removing a country from NATO, there's always a mechanism. Like if you want to say, look, okay, as the United States, okay, we can't remove Turkey, we're not going to be a part of NATO. We're going to start our own new NATO-like thing. And if you want to join us, great. And if not, let Turkey defend you from Putin, and let's see how that works out. So yeah, there's a mechanism even when there's no mechanism. Thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat.
Yeah, just to so we are clear on that, what it means no mechanism is the fact that there is, in a sense, no legal precedence. It was never set up. But yeah, if the nations actually wanted to, it would probably be uh, similar to when you want to enter a nation. Basically, whenever there is a nation that wants to enter NATO, it has to be unanimous. And Turkey has been actually holding up, if I'm not mistaken, has been actually holding up a few nations from joining. I think Finland and Sweden. It has actually been barring them from joining. So we already know they are not aligned with the West. They are not aligned with all the other NATO nations.
yeah,
Like
preventing
like yeah, just to point out, I hate Hungary, but even a country like Hungary has, in a sense, you know, came in to this one when it came
yeah,
to Sweden and Finland entering.
preventing Finland, a country that might actually be is under threat from Russia, which is why NATO was formed in the first place. I mean, yeah, you don't need more evidence when it comes to Turkey under Erdogan, but here is some more. And here, this is also some more about Israel's weakness. So some of you might remember the flotilla. I believe it was in 2009. Don't remember what it was called, but it was the IHH, which is designated in some countries, I believe, as a terrorist organization, right? But they sent ships with humanitarian aid to break the blockade, and there were seven ships, if I'm not mistaken. They were told by Israel to turn around. Six of them did. One didn't. The one that didn't prepared not to. They were well prepared. And Israeli soldiers went to take over the ship, were attacked. They went unarmed because they thought, okay, these are peaceful protesters. So they went unarmed. They were attacked. Eventually, they had to send in people who were armed. I think 9 people or 10 people were killed from those so-called peace activists. And uh, again, like with every incident where savages try to kill Jews, the world was up in arms about this, about how evil the Jews were. And Erdogan was the leader. I mean, Erdogan regularly refers to Netanyahu as Hitler, and Netanyahu at the time, wouldn't apologize. Eventually, under Netanyahu, Israel apologized. Israel gave Turkey money to give to the families of the the those few among the savages who um, ended up meeting their 72 virgins that day. And then relations were kind of okay. Even then, Erdogan the whole time in his statements were like, yeah, we still are a part of the Palestinian struggle or what have you. And yeah, so Erdogan has been playing Israel's desire to be accepted specifically by those who will never accept Israel, will always hate, will even when the last Jew is murdered by these savages and Turkey gets its way, they will still find a way to blame Israel after it's gone. So yeah, we need to really treat these people again, like we say about the Palestinians, and we'll cover this on tomorrow's show. Listen to what they say and believe them. They are telling you who they are, and we should treat them accordingly.
Yeah, let me just quickly point out, and I think we usually say Michael's name, but I increasingly think he's just some Russian troll. I don't want to say that directly, but he mentions the fact that if Turkey goes out, then Turkey, if US kicks Turkey out, or if NATO countries kick Turkey out, Turkey will just buy arms from Russia. Let them. Russia is absolutely useless. They have like a GDP of, I think, Spain. Uh, they are, in their fight against Ukraine, they are completely weak. We've seen how pathetic they are. They are completely incompetent. And it shows that dictatorships are incompetent. Dictatorships, they cannot be strong. That's why Western countries have been leading the world, basically. And it will always be like that as long as the West stays free, as long as the West stays relatively much more freer than this sort of dictatorship or authoritarian nations. Let them all band together. Altogether, they are useless. I mean, whenever people talk about Russia, they always say, we should, the Third World War, we should, what about the nuclear weapons? I mean, after what I've seen, what they've done in Ukraine, I'm kind of wondering, are those nuclear weapons even functional? Like, can they even keep those in order?
Yeah, back when we had Harry Binswanger's weekly show on this channel, HBTV, I remember there was right after, I think it was right after the war started, somebody asked him in a super chat, "Do you think Russia is going to nuke Ukraine?" And he said, "No, I don't think they will, but they're so incompetent that if they do try to, they might just fire a missile and it might fall back down on them." Kind of like the Palestinians, which is again not a surprise that they support them. And yes, what you said is exactly what Western policy should be. We should start judging and judging people based on their values and judging countries based on their cultures because that tells you, the culture is made up of the values of the people in that culture. So yeah, Western culture is better, freedom is better, dictatorship is evil, and backwards Palestinian and the wider Arab culture are evil. And once we come to that conclusion, we'll also, we'll change the way we deal with Russia, we'll change the way we deal with China, we'll change the way we obviously deal with the Middle East, we'll change the way we deal with countries like Turkey. There is no way, I hear people saying, look how many look at the UN General Assembly votes and how many countries vote against Israel. You're isolated. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's a badge of honor when Iran and North Korea, and all these despicable countries and Russia and China all vote against you. It doesn't necessarily mean you're doing something good, but it means you're doing something that bad people think is bad at the very least. So yeah, we should be very happy to cut ties with most countries in the world and have some sort of coalition of free countries.
Yeah, I think I'm falling into troll neighborhood too much. But someone in the chat says NATO can't win a war with Russia or they wouldn't be pushing for a ceasefire. This again, this is almost like a Russian propaganda. Like Ukraine has barely been allowed to like get actual equipment to defend themselves. For a long time, they were basically the West said they would not give them long-range missiles, so they wouldn't strike in the Russian territory. So basically, yeah, you can defend yourself, but you cannot defend yourself meter over the border where the actual facilities that are fighting against you are, where the actual bases are, where the actual things that are attacking you are. The this whole the whole of Ukraine war has been like so pathetic in terms of the West and how much it can actually support their potential ally. I think it should have been much bigger. Like that, this was the greatest time to basically show this is what happens if you mess with the West, and not even directly with us, just someone that is allied to us. And I think it has been an okay show, the fact that Russia is still failing and has lost many people, has lost a lot of equipment. But again, this could have been such a big show, especially when it comes to some future conflicts such as China and Taiwan. We could have really showed here that, yeah, we will defend even people who are not directly allied to us, but we have friendly relationship with. And yeah, just to jump in, and again, this should have been shown with Israel. Turkey should be kicked out and shown, yeah, you don't mess with allies of the West, and Israel is our ally.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, that's in large part Israel's problem. Israel not standing up for itself, which of course is the topic of the reality show, just coming up in 3 minutes. Israel is giving up. I know I already saw that people in that chat are upset, but that is the fact of it, and that's true of the rest of the West, except Israel is giving up quicker, and Israel is the front line. So Israel's giving up is something that we are seeing unfold in front of our eyes in really a sad and terrifying way. Again, Erdogan's comments about invading Israel came yesterday, a day after the attack that killed 12 children. Uh, the announcement by the UK that they're not going to sell arms to Israel came right after this. I mean, the timing of this, the fact that so many countries decided post October 7th to recognize the Palestinian state, the timing of this matters. The timing of this matters. The Palestinians are listening. Hezbollah is listening. Iran is listening, and they are hearing that the West has given up. Um, and yeah, unfortunately, this is not going to end well unless we really reverse course. Daniel, any parting thoughts?
Gaza der Länder ist, Türkiye der Länder ist.
And Beirut, I think it is time to remember that Beirut is where the government of Lebanon, from where these rockets are fired, uh, they are responsible. Yeah, the government is responsible for what happens in a country. Thanks everybody for watching. The reality show starts in a couple of minutes. Again, we will be talking about Israel giving up, and maybe how to prevent it. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.